Hey, I took a few days off. My son decided to go on a landscaping venture and we spooked him up a trailer. Remember we talked about being able to do for yourself and make and have and save and locate? Well, I bumped into a guy that I really didn't know, but he knew who I was in the community and I knew who he was. And he sold my son a utility trailer for $150. So we were looking at $800, $900, $1,200 trailers, $2,000 trailers. So we bought this trailer and I welded it up and fixed things up for him. And I've been working on it the last couple of days, and I cut my nose. I walked into a piece of angle iron. Anyway, it was kind of hilarious, but, it could have been so much worse. And I didn't cuss the whole time I was working on it. It was all good. The only time I cussed was when my son and I got together and started working on it. But that's just because he's 19 and I'm a perfect dad. That's just the way that goes. So he will learn and catch up with me sometime, and eventually he'll probably get me raised so that I'm easy to get along with, too. Anyway, I'm back to the motor, and I want to show you all something I almost overlooked and forgot to do. I finished up all my rocker arms, marked them all, got them all, and I'm happy with the way they're set. I rotated the engine over several times, and I'm good with that. And then I remembered that I put these heads on. Now, heads can go either way. You can put them on this side or that side, and it's just reversed. However, these particular E7 heads I have what looks to be an insert in here. This is some kind of a threaded insert that has a bottom in it, and it's sealed, and it screws into this valley or galley right here. You know what this galley is? It runs all the way along here. There's a hole that runs all the way along the inside of the head. It is an exhaust smog galley. Up inside these chambers is what's called a smog bump. It takes a little bit of exhaust and it pulls it out these pipes in the back of the engine originally. On the back it pulls out both sides with a pipe that always rusts out on you, and it puts it through the EGR valve. Well, we're blocking those off. But I made sure I put the heads on without the inserts in the wrong spot. I put them in the front where they belong so I can put them on my alternator and my power steering bracket. Here in the back I got this open hole. It'd be blowing out exhaust. I'll fire this sucker up. It'd be like, and I'll be like, what the heck? So what I did was I got me a drill and I drilled this out gently and I tapped it, and I'm putting in a plug in each one. It's an interference pipe thread that I'm using, so it's going to go in and block it off. A little bit of carbon will seal up the threads if any is needed, and it'll be done and sealed, and I have no baloney noise to scare me about what I did wrong with the build. Who caught room for a problem? There might be a problem here. I drilled this out and tapped it after the heads were put together, and the new valve job was done, and everything else. Did I contaminate the valve seats and the valves? Did I get crap down in that hole down on the valve? Because you remember it comes through the galley and the port above the exhaust. Here's how you keep from doing that when you have to do something at the point where you really didn't think you should have done it, but you had to find a way to make it happen anyway. I'm going to turn the camera around and show you how to make that work and make it work out okay without doing more damage and getting particulates of metal, there I go with that CSI word, down in on the valve seat, which will score it when you start it up and ruin everything. Okay, we talked about drilling a hole and tapping in here. And this hole that runs through the head inside comes out that front hole, and then above it there's these ports right here that have a little hole in them. There's a hole in each port. Okay, I took a piece of paper towel, stuck it down in on top of the valve and blocked it off back there, but I left where this port is open. I went ahead and drilled and everything else, then I took an air hose with a rubber tip and I blew in that little port and blew the particles back out the hole. So that did pretty good. Another thing you can do is take your tap and your drill and dip them in grease. Put grease on them when you work and work slow, and the grease will pick up the metal particulates, and you can remove them while you work. So a shop vac is also very helpful. But it's really good not to get down on top of that beautiful shiny new valve in that valve seat. Don't get contaminants down in there, and then when it opens and slams shut the first couple of times, it makes a mark and then it doesn't seal right, and then the hot exhaust comes through and makes it really not seal right, and then your valve job is null and void. So work with grease, a shop vac, an air hose, paper towel down to hold the block everything off. Do everything you can to keep the particulates out of your motor. I was out here tinkering in the shop and hoping to get a little bit done today after I got my grass mowing done and got over that trailer thing for the week. And I was working on the engine. I did this tap in the back, put those plugs in. Well, that's as far as I got because the phone rang and my new employer wants me to come into work and pull a short shift. So I'm going to have to go in and play the make a money game. I really don't want to talk about that right now because you guys wouldn't believe where I've taken a job. Anyway, we will talk about that at another point in time if it's okay with my company for me to say so. And you don't want to look at my ugly bug right now. Let me finish up what I'm going to do. I've got to cover this motor up, engine. I always say motor, engine. I got to cover this engine up before I go on my way and keep things out of it, keep the particulates out of it. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do quickly to cover it up, and I'll give you a hint of what's to come. I went over here to my warehouse, and there's an empty nail hook right there. I took something down. There's an air cleaner. That's going to go on this engine. There's a distributor. It might go on this engine too. But I took an intake down. And I painted it up, and I'm going to reuse it. And there it is. It's an old Edelbrock Performer RPM. That ought to be a good one, and I think it'll be nice. I'm trying a new paint called Cast Blast instead of Illuma Blast. I think it looks pretty groovy. But here's something else to think about. You can't put regular valve covers back on these with these rocker arms. They're too tall. They're too tall. You get some regular valve cover, you start looking at them, and they don't fit. There's baffles inside. And you go to put them on, and they don't go down far enough. So I got to do something else. So I went up here and I looked. Remember we talked about saving parts and having it done? I'm lucky. And I've got some really cool stuff. Those right there are 1970 Mustang aftermarket Cal 500 customs, but I'm not going to use those on this one. They're going to require some spacers to make them tall enough to clear. I just need something that's going to clear my rocker arms on a budget and get me going. And look what I've got right here. I'm going to set one of these on the engine and let y'all take a look at it. My son, when he was 15, 16, had a buddy who was doing some powder coating. And took a set of plain old aluminums and they powder coated them in this kid shop and had a big time doing it. And they're a little scarred up and whatnot, but you know what? These are going to go on this engine, and they are a great memory. Every time I look at them, I think of my son, and I'm just crazy about that kid. So we're going to put these on the engine just like they are and wipe them down a little bit, and they will cover up good, and I'll be able to put some big breathers in. All will be well. Okay, it's time to cover this up. We're all buttoned up here, and I'm going to start closing the engine up. I think we're in pretty good shape. I've double-checked a lot of things, which is always a good idea. I'm going to use the original timing cover. I'm not going to use the original water pump, but I took the original timing cover off and the pump was all in one piece. And you'll notice the way this is mounted, when this is mounted on here, that there are some tabs right there. That's a place where you can pry a little bit if you have to get that gasket to break. But I like to use a hammer like this. No damage. Sure don't want to hit it with a metal hammer because it'll crack it. The resonation through the metal. Bolts that are stuck like this, I'm going to soak with PB Catalyst and I'm going to work them out gently. We're going to be using a used water pump, believe it or not. One of my favorites, an Edelbrock. It's a high flow, high performance water pump. It's built for reverse flow, which means I'm going to be running a serpentine pump on a smooth pulley, turn the pump reverse flow. One thing you need to remember is very, very important. On these small block Fords, you've got different covers. Maybe Brian will include in a video picture of all the different numbers and all the different covers. But the covers are different in the way the water flows through them, the way it enters the block at the back, and the way the gaskets and the plate match up. You also make sure you use the right plate to get everything put together like you should. So it's important that you use a matching plate, matching cover, and matching pump that all work together. Some of the older 302s had a different flow to them, and you'll wind up with an overheating problem if you do that. I'm about to do something that I would stop most people and say, hold it, wait, stop, don't do that, don't use that tool. But I'm going to show you here, and there is a proper use for it. And I'm doing it because everything's wiggling around, and I can't get it in the vise like I want. I can't get things held still. And so this is going to be a viable solution as long as you're careful. And you need to be very careful what you use this tool on. It almost will destroy as much in my shop as my die grinder will. Here it is, an electric torque wrench. It will tear the crap out of everything if you're not careful. It'll break your wrist, but it's also very useful sometimes. I'll put a strap wrench on this pulley. I'm going to hold the pulley still. I'm going to take the electric rattle wrench with an impact socket, and I'm just going to bump these 1/2 inches. I could use an air one, which is less powerful. I could use a ratcheting type, ratchet slower one if I wanted to as well. That would probably be fine to break them loose. Don't reinstall them with that, because if I do, I'm only going into this steel flange right here, and I don't want to tear it up when I put it back together. I'm a firm believer in a torque wrench and a gentle hand and experience to tell you how tight things are getting and how to get them loose. If you put this on something that is seized, rusted, or in trouble, it will break it. It will cause heat when it impacts. It'll heat it up and it'll snap it off, and then you've got yourself a real mess. So be careful what you choose to use it on. Well, okay, I got this loosened, and I took this off here, and look. Wait a minute. Uh-oh. This is not the same. Okay. This pump came off a 5.0 Explorer engine. Okay, 96. This pump was used on a 5.0 for years. 2 different ones, actually. But there's something different. I'm going to stop right here. There are some subtle cues. Ford will give you subtle cues. Everything's different. They got all different kinds of combinations. But there will be some subtle cues to things you might hear in the background or you might know about that will give you a clue that it's time to stop and start comparing things. I've got a 302 cover here off my son's 1970 302 that we built. Of course, it's different. It had a mechanical fuel pump. This one doesn't have a provision for that. This can be a good time for Brian to put that chart in here and show us all the different covers. And I'll see if I can send him a picture of that along with this video. That's what I'm talking about right here. Look at that. I remember hearing something about shallow mounting belt setups where all the pulleys are closer to the engine and all the accessories are mounted at a different height. And you know what? That's the situation we got right here. So I'm going to have to decide what cover is going to work with what water pump to go on my engine and have that serpentine belt line up with the power steering pump and the alternator and all the other brackets I'm going to use. I got to have a match set all the way through. It's not impossible. There's really only 2 schools on this one, and one is close quarters and one is standard depth. Okay, now right now we're at what I like to call a holy crap moment. I can't help do that sometimes, I'm sorry. But we are. We're at a holy crap moment. We've got to stop and take a deep breath and not get frustrated. I've got this setup lined out over here. I've got it laid out, and I'm going to lay out all the options that I have in my storage of stuff. And then I want to ascertain which direction I'm going to go and what I'm going to end up with a finished product. What I don't want to do is use the wrong cover and then say, well, I'll get another water pump and get a shallow one, a brand new one, and put that on, even if it is a reverse flow, and that's fine, and then find out that my pulley and my crank balancer is the wrong one, have to buy one of those, and then find out that my alternator bracket's not going to work and line up, and I got to buy a new one of those, because this whole budget build will spiral out of control, and we'll be in $1,000 with billet stuff, and that's not what we want on this. So I just need to take a deep breath. I'm going to compile some parts, and I'll show you what I've got. Most of them are tagged, or they've got part numbers on them. We can look them up and chart. This is also a good point where you don't say, well, a guy told me, or I heard this, or I heard that. Get some good information. You can on groups and forums, yes, and you can listen to some of the stuff I say, but I'm going to leave out some of the details on this